It's going to take 10
Hi
minutes.
everyone, my name is Emily Kimbrell, and I chose to write my senior thesis and do my presentation over human trafficking. I felt that this was the perfect topic to explore through interdisciplinary research due to its complex nature. Complex meaning there isn't just one correct solution to this worldwide issue. That's another thing that does make it so complex, is that it's happening all over the world. People of different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, gender, really anybody could fall victim to this worldwide issue. I felt that it was also an important topic to discuss because it is so inhumane. Strips individuals of their basic human rights. People are stripped from their daily lives, taken away from their families, put through unimaginable trauma, and usually living in horrific settings. Therefore, it is a problem that must be addressed, and due to its complex nature, many people with different backgrounds and knowledge could be of potential help. So this leads to the two disciplines that I chose to approach this problem with, and those are human sciences and health professions. If these disciplines were to integrate their backgrounds of study, it would allow for breakthroughs in research, victims being identified, and potentially opening up more opportunities and resources for the victims. So the question that I want to ask through this research is, how can workers in human sciences and health professions integrate their knowledge and become a vital step in properly identifying and treating the victims of human trafficking? So, human sciences and health professions do share similarities, such as working to better lives of these individuals and ensure that the individuals that they're taking care of are provided with the utmost care. So diving in first with human sciences, research has shown that many times victims of human trafficking encounter an interaction with a social worker or even a health professional at least once, meaning that it's a crucial opportunity for these professionals to end victims' sufferings and prevent them from going back. Human sciences is a broad range of study, including occupations such as social services, human development and behavior, counseling, coordinators, and that's just to name a few. I have attached a reference here from Alvarez and Alessi in 2012. Social workers in direct practice can play a crucial role in identifying victims in settings such as hospital emergency rooms, health clinics, and shelters. So note here that this reference is speaking about social workers specifically, and that is because social work plays a big role in being of service to human trafficking victims. They assist victims out of their current situations and push them towards a better life each year. To recognize the victims, social workers need to first be prompted the severity of this global problem. So into the research findings, worldwide there is a record of 27 million individuals that are victims of human trafficking. So there are a multitude of factors that can put people more at risk. This leads us to the push and pull factors. So push factors are factors that traffickers use to their advantage. They're factors that are issues in certain countries that influence citizens to flee, usually in hopes for a better life. So individuals might be suffering things such as poverty, violence, their country's crime rate, or they might even be fleeing due to their country's politics. So when choosing where to go, people often fall for pull factors. So pull factors are the factors that influence individuals on where to go. They're often sought out through media propaganda, employment opportunities, and location advertising. So this is important to note because pull factors are easy for traffickers to take advantage of, because oftentimes these individuals that are fleeing their hometowns are vulnerable. They're not knowing how they're going to start new. And this puts them at risk for falling for these false promises and getting reeled into a trap. One of those being potentially human trafficking. This is important for human science professionals to look out for so that they can indicate an individual's characteristics. Indicators can be classified into three categories, which are situational, story, and demeanor. This focuses on a person's situation, their narrative, and their emotional state. So if a professional is feeling that they might have a victim sitting right in front of them, a question or two for them to ask themselves is this person giving signs of being controlled by another individual? Are they frequently changing location, or even do they have signs of history of sexual abuse? This would require the professional to look into their history, their background, and their current setting. And also an important thing to look out for is their body language and any triggered emotions when answering these questions. An important thing to note that human science professionals must be aware of is that it's not always as easy it may seem to remove these victims out of their current situation. And this is due to victims are often brainwashed into thinking that they cannot get out, that their controller is doing everything with their best interest in mind. They have fallen for these promised false opportunities. They may even be financially dependent on their controller, and they have fear for what would happen if they were to leave. Something that will make it easier for their social worker to help these victims is to create a trusting relationship with them. To do this, the worker must be attentive, intentional with their word choice, show genuine care, communicate well, do away with judgment, and present the victim with all of their different options and opportunities. The next step could potentially be conducting a needs assessment. This would be an assessment diving into the individual's physical, emotional, medical, and spiritual needs. A lot of these victims have lost all form of control. They might be struggling with substance abuse, addiction, physical and mental health diagnoses, and sometimes even pregnancy, so that these things must be addressed when leaving their situation. The social worker can present options such as healthcare, law enforcement, alternative shelter, rehabilitation, and counseling. Another thing to note through human science professionals is resources for family therapy. It's not always thought about, but it is an important aspect in the journey to helping the family members of the victim. So the individual lived through the unthinkable. Having it happen to a loved one and feeling helpless and loss of control can take a toll on emotions and mental health. So family therapy is an option for those with relationships with the victim, allowing them to work through the trauma together and rekindle those connections. So through the human science findings, we dove into what resources and what trainings these professionals go through to identify and treat their victims. So next up is health professions. Health professions discipline includes occupations that provide healthcare services to a wide range of individuals. It's comprised of occupations such as physicians, pharmacists, nurses, medical assistants, and more. Similar to human science professionals, this discipline includes workers that are highly educated and skilled, and they do require proper training to achieve their occupational titles. So 80% of victims are reported to come in contact with a healthcare worker.
I cannot believe how many
Therefore, making it imperative that these professionals know the proper indicators and the right things to say. So going into the steps for identification, the first step for a healthcare professional would be ensuring that the victims are identified by their healthcare worker, and to do so, health professionals must go through the proper training. So some examples of trainings reported by nurses are hospital-based trainings, conferences, webinars, on-site trainings, and survivor presentations. Out of the many signs of human trafficking, the easiest for a healthcare professional to identify would be physical warning signs. This would include bruised or damaged body parts indicating physical or sexual abuse, substance use, self-inflicted injuries, or sexually transmitted infections. Another physical sign would be a controlling companion, making all the decisions for the patient. So if a healthcare professional is asking the patient of their medical history or their current living situation, and the patient doesn't feel as if they can answer any of their own questions, that would be a red flag for a healthcare professional. This would make the healthcare worker proceed to go through a screening method. This would mean that the healthcare worker would take the patient and remove them from other individuals, and after the separation, the patient is given privacy and asked specific questions, which would be better known as screening questions. The questions that are asked focus on the patient's current living situation, their sex, safety, threats, shelter, and food source. An example question would be, has anyone ever asked you to exchange sex for shelter, food, or other necessities? So if these questions trigger an emotional response, the healthcare worker should continue to follow up with other questions. Another thing to note for healthcare professionals is how to speak to these individuals and how to set the tone of a safe environment. So compassion is a key component on how to create a trusting relationship with their patient. Compassionate care is the key to victims feeling safe enough to disclose their suffering. As nurses, they have a unique role in offering critical intervention. Out of all the measures taken to identify and treat human trafficking victims, one of the final steps to take is methods of prevention. To do this, the healthcare worker notifies authorities, provides resources to the victim, allowing them to leave their current situation. There are also organizations that are put in place, one being the Polaris Project. The Polaris Project offers resources such as education to the public, advocacy of policy changes, and operates the National Human Trafficking Hotline.
Are you busy right now?
It's also important to raise awareness through putting resources on display for everybody to see, such as common areas of the healthcare facility, waiting rooms, restrooms, etc., common meeting areas. This raises awareness and helps prevent the continuation of the cycle. So moving on, there are methods, which dives into the potential solutions, which would be spreading awareness and providing more proper trainings. I do feel that there are gaps in the research, and they must be approached with a holistic approach, meaning that it must be approached from the bigger picture. Human trafficking is so complex that it must be approached as a holistic problem. It's a multicultural issue that is far from being stopped. However, with the help of people from all around the world, a difference can be made. So the research findings, warning signs, resources should be taught before granting certifications to these professionals. This means throughout the training and education before moving on to the job field, the healthcare workers and human sciences professionals should be required to go through extensive trainings on how they have the opportunity to make a difference in this large, complex issue.
Who all was playing?
Clayton, Brandon, Garrett, Drake, Aiden, Lacey, Wyatt.
Also, because it is a multicultural issue and can be approached in many different ways, I have attached some suggestions for further research studies. First, an in-depth historical review of literature should be completed to find out more about the research that has been done. Then, using that information, a quantitative research project could be designed to address any gaps in the literature that I mentioned, such as questionnaires, like Likert type scales. The tools to be used would be tested for reliability and validity before sending them out to professionals. After analyzing the quantitative data derived from the questionnaires, a qualitative study could follow. The interviews from health professionals and human sciences professionals would ask their opinions on what could be improved. Moving on to my conclusion, human trafficking is a multifaceted problem. It affects all. Research showed that the opportunities that human science and health professionals have to combat this worldwide issue, it is imperative that they integrate their trainings and their studies. If these workers were to work together to combat this issue, it would open up more opportunities for research findings. In summary, it is up to the healthcare and science professionals to lead the way in solving this complex problem.
I know, you said that to me.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Kimbrell, and I chose to write my